welcome to the 11th episode of the Knitting Jungle podcast. If you're new here, hello, my name is Sarah. I live in the Boston area, and this is a podcast where I talk about everything that I've been knitting on. Occasionally, I'll include some crochet, sewing, and machine knitting. So if that sounds good to you, then snuggle up with a hot cup of coffee and knitting or whatever your craft you're working on, and I would love for you to join me here today. So if you live in the US, I hope you had a lovely Thanksgiving holiday break. Hopefully you got a couple days off work. We had a really busy week here. We were hosting our brother and sister-in-law and their little girl, who's the cousin of my girls. And we just had a really nice week with family catching up, and we hosted Thanksgiving dinner itself here at my house. There was 11 people, grandparents, brothers, sisters, everything, and it was a really nice time. But I didn't spend that much time knitting because I was so busy with that. So I think it's been about 3 weeks since my last episode, and now I finally have enough to show you, so I'm recording another episode today. So today I have, I think 3 finished objects and 1.5 whips. So let's get started. So let's start with what I'm wearing. I went over this kofte in my very first episode ever, so I don't know how good that episode is, but I probably talk about it in a lot more detail in episode number 1. But anyways, this is a self-drafted kofte cardigan, and it's made in rauma fino in a dark charcoal gray color and white. And this was my very first Colorwork sweater project, and I thought go big or go home, and I designed my own because I saw a couple patterns I liked on Pinterest, but I wasn't able to get the patterns. I think they were either in Norwegian or out of print from Norway, so I couldn't actually get the patterns, but if I zoomed in on the Colorwork, I was able to make my own chart in Stitch Fiddle for these. So I think there's a pattern for this flower motif somewhere out there. If I find it, I'll link it down below. And then on the sleeve, there's another band section here, and then down here is another motif. This one is definitely from a book called Kofte Boken 2. I think it's a Norwegian book, but it's out of print or whatever the reason I can't get it here. But I just copied the pattern directly from there. And then here on the bottom of the sleeve is some piano key design, which I think is kind of cute. And I knit this bottom up and then steeked it here. And I did some afterthought pockets here. So if I were to open this, you can see a little pocket bag, just plain stockinette leftover yarn bag. And I wear this cardigan a lot because I just love having pockets. So, and then the button band here is double knit. So I knitted one side, did one edge of purl stitches for the turning edge, and then knitted another inch or so, and then sewed it down to the inside of the kofte. So even though this was my first project, it's one of my favorite ones. I think I was really proud that I designed it. Well, I kind of designed it myself, but I did steal the Colorwork charts from other projects. But I am very pleased with the fit. I did raglan decreases here. So I knit the body in the round and then knit the sleeves separately, and then joined the body and both sleeves all on one giant cable needle, and then knit from this armpit area where they were all joined up to the neck and made raglan decreases as I went along. It's a super oversized forgiving fit, but I'm just glad it fits at all. So I'm really pleased with how this turned out, and like I said, I wear this a lot, a couple times a week, because I just love the pockets, and this yarn is amazing, the rauma fino. It's wearing so beautifully. It's getting even softer the more I wear it, and kind of felting and fuzzing up a little bit. And pilling slightly under the arms, but I don't think it's too bad given the amount that I do wear it. So my first whip you will have already seen in episodes 9 and 10, my 2 previous episodes, because I've been working on this since the beginning of November. These are stockings for my little girls, and well, they look so good on camera, especially with my sweater. It's like a Colorwork bonanza. But I did this one first. This is the Arna and Carlos 2023 stocking. They did a knit along last year, which I didn't do because I hadn't heard of them yet. But I got this pattern from their website and it turned out so well, so beautiful. And one of my girls, her name starts with L, so I just did a little Colorwork L at the top here. We've got some trees, some candlesticks or fireworks, little dancing children, snowflakes, and then this heart design I love. And then my actual finished object, since the last episode, is the second one for my girl whose name starts with K, so just a fancy little K there. And her pattern, I did a mashup of Arna and Carlos's 2023 stocking, this year's stocking knit along that they did, and their a third stocking called Nice. So I just combined all my favorite motifs from those 3 stockings to create this one. So I think in their Nice pattern you can find the snowflake. The heart design is from the 2023 stocking. The trees are from this year's stocking, and then this beautiful bell motif is from this year's stocking knit along as well. And for the yarn, I just use all different yarn scraps that I had in stash. The green yarn is Knit Rennie Super Soft Lamb's Wool, and I made my husband a sweater out of this exact green yarn here. The red is Sadnisgarn Pirgint, and the white I held 2 different strands of random white scraps together. I think it was Rauma Fino from this sweater actually, held together with Biche et Bouche Les Petites Lambs Wool in white as well. And one of my favorite parts about doing these stockings is that I held this tinsel glitter thread. This is from Drops. You can get it on lindahobby.com for like $2 or $3. And I just held that usually in the background color, like the white, and it just gives a beautiful, well, you can't see it here, but I'll include some other footage, but it just gives a really beautiful Christmassy effect to the stockings. And I'll show you what it looks like in our fireplace downstairs. It's an original fireplace to our very old house, and I think it just looks amazing, and I'm gonna have a hard time taking these down in the spring. I've already decided not to take them down after Christmas, but earliest March, I think. So since I talked a lot about those stockings in my past 2 episodes, that's all I'm gonna say pretty much. Oh, sorry. I knit those on double pointed needles. They were 6-inch long double pointed needles, and they were 3.5 millimeter, and they're knit from the bottom up. And this was my first attempt at making a sock type shape, and I think it was very easy and straightforward. It went pretty well. And I think you increase on every other round for the toe, and then when you get to the heel, you can either do an afterthought heel where you put in a piece of waste yarn and then pick up those stitches later on and do the heel. That's what I did for the second stocking, but for the first stocking I just knit the heel as soon as I got there. And I much prefer that method. I think it saves time having to pick up stitches and do all that. And I think in this year's stocking, their heel was a little bit less pointy, but I needed this stocking to match the first stocking I made, so I made their original pointy heel, which is found in their 2023 pattern. In their 2024 pattern, I think towards the end, they decrease every single row, and I decreased every other row, which gives it a more pointy shape. I think it's fine. Santa's not gonna care. So, oh, and at the top I did a little crocheted chain just for 2 hanging loops. I really like the 2 loops instead of 1. It hangs really nicely on the stocking holder. So yeah, my girls really like these and we're all really excited for Santa to check them out. Okay, my next two finished objects are gift knits for my girls. They both asked for toys, like little knitted toys. And in my previous episode, you will have seen I made a crocheted hedgehog for my older girl. And I think my younger girl wanted this, but then she changed her mind. So I guess she's gonna be getting two little toys. So yeah, maybe this will just be a family item. I'll show you what I actually made her for Christmas next. But the first thing I did was make this little mouse. And this is from Claire Garland's Magical Woodland Knits book, which is so beautiful. Look how realistic this deer is. So my daughter was looking through this book recently and she saw this little mouse and asked me to make it. And luckily it's the smallest pattern in the whole book, so I said, sure, yeah, I can make that. And here it is. This photograph's a lot better than what I'm able to do. But I pretty much used the exact same color scheme here. That looks pretty good. So I did this on 2.5mm needles. I use double pointed, but it's knitted flat, which I love. I don't like, could you imagine knitting this in the round with such a small circumference? That would totally be a nightmare. So what you do is you start from the tip of the nose. Okay, I just checked. That's why I like to make my episodes a little bit less spaced out, because after 2 weeks I forget everything. So you start at the tail end and you knit the whole brown part flat. And when you get to the nose, you kind of switch to white and then knit this entire belly side flat. I'll show you a picture of what it looks like once you finish the whole thing. And then you kind of fold it back in on itself and just seam it up. And this did not take very long at all, because it's tiny. And once you finish seaming up the body, you pick up some stitches to make these little pink toe areas here. And then you make ears and sew those on. And I embroidered a little pink nose and attached some safety eyes before. I do this before I stuff it all the way. And at the very end, you make a little I-cord tail. When it's just sitting here, the legs are kind of splayed out a little bit. I tried to steam the legs down like this, but it didn't really work. I think if I just need to do a couple of tacking stitches right in the little armpit, and then the legs will be a little bit more down. But overall, I'm really happy. It's a little bit too lifelike, like in a creepy way. But I showed the girls already because I don't think anyone wants this for Christmas anymore, and they think it's cute. And at Thanksgiving, she even ate a little cheese, so I think she really likes it here already. So yeah, that was on 2.5mm double pointed needles. It doesn't need to be double pointed, but that's just what I had. And I held 2 of these yarns together. I just had these in my stash. This is a Drops Alpaca, like a golden yellow kind of color. I made one of my daughters a sweater with this, and I just had this left over. And then this is Isager Silk Mohair. This is a beautiful light golden brown type of shade, and I made this sweater. I used it in this sweater here. The brown part, it was held together with Hillesvåg Luna. So that's just leftover I had from that project. Yeah, it seems like all of these projects today are stash busting projects, which is always good. And this is an amazing combination, alpaca and silk mohair. It's so soft. Okay, my next finished object is another toy, and this is what my younger daughter asked me to make her a teddy bear this year for Christmas, so that's what I did. I used a pattern I found on Etsy, and I'll link that below. And isn't she adorable? I just picked whatever knitted teddy bear pattern I thought was cutest. This one is a very nice size. I like that her arms and legs are able to move. She can be animated. And this one is also knitted flat and then seamed up and stuffed. So to make this, I used 3mm double pointed needles, and I like to put little stitch stoppers here just to make them like regular needles so one end isn't pointy, because when I knit, I like to anchor one of the needles against my body like this, and if this is a lot more comfortable than a double pointed point. But anyways, you knit this teddy bear flat. You can start with the head first, and I think you start at the nose, make some increases, and then decrease for the back of the head, and then pull all the stitches taut so it's a very seamless closure there at the back. Put some safety eyes in, an embroidered nose. The design didn't ask for a mouth, but my girls really like when toys have a little smile. They think it's cute, so I put that in. And then there was some interesting shaping here in between the eyes. Basically, you run a piece of yarn in between the eyes and then pull it taut so that it gives kind of a little puckered snout as opposed to just a big bulbous ball head. After that, I made the body in pretty much the same way as the head. You start here at the top with very few stitches. You increase here in the belly section, knit for several rows, and then make some decreases and close it up here at the bottom. Then you knit the arms and legs flat as well, and then seam them up. Or the arm was knit kind of in, wait, was it? No, none of these were in the round. Oh, here's the seam. Okay, yep, the arm was also knitted flat and seamed up in the back. You can't really see because this yarn combination is very good. And the leg has a really cool shape. It has a little foot. So you do some short rows to make this flat foot type of shape. And even some purl stitches to define the foot versus the leg. And a little tail here in the back. So this didn't take very long at all, maybe 2 or 3 days. And one thing I did differently than when I've made toys in the past was I made it so that these legs are super floppy so that she could sit or stand or do splits or whatever. Usually I tack it down like this so it stays perfectly, but when my girls play with toys, they like to animate them and make them do things. So that's one thing I changed in this project that I really like. Oh, and the ears are knit separately and then sewn on, and they're actually doubled up. So you knit some piece kind of in a flat semicircle and then fold it in on itself, so it's a nice thick ear there. And this yarn combination is also one of my go-to yarn combos because it's super duper soft, and that is Drops Air held together with a silk mohair. Drops Air is, I think it's nylon, alpaca, and a little bit of wool, and it's a chainette type of thing, so there's a lot of air in this that just, I don't know what it does, but it's very soft and very light and fluffy. And then any silk mohair scrap I had, and I just combined this grayish Drops Air color with white. And together this makes the softest, this would make a really good kid sweater, or anybody who has a problem with itchiness. I highly suggest checking out this Drops Air yarn. And it's pretty cheap too. So after I finished her, I lightly steamed her without touching anything, just to get the yarn to swell up and get the fuzziness to stick out. It didn't actually make much of a difference with this Drops Air yarn, but with alpaca and some of the other wool yarns, like when I steamed this got a lot softer and fluffier and just filled in a lot of the gaps. So yes, those are two little toy finished objects I have here. Now I will move on to my whips. Okay, next up is my Christmas sweater that I'm hoping to finish by Christmas, obviously. You will have seen me starting this in my previous episode, episode 10. I think maybe I was halfway done with the yoke or so. So I finished the yoke and the body, and one of the sleeves. So I made myself a little calendar of how much I should do each day to make sure I finish in time for Christmas. And as of now, I'm one day ahead of schedule. Woohoo! So I'm planning to finish on December 19, so that gives plenty of wiggle room in case I get sick or the kids are homesick from school or something like that. So this pattern is entirely in Swedish, but I had no problem using Google Translate to help me. I didn't run into any problems. I wouldn't necessarily choose this as your first sweater project or colorwork project if you need to do a full translation like that. But if you've done another yoke style sweater or another colorwork sweater, I think you'll be just fine. So this is called the Trojan Allmoge, and I used Google to try to help me pronounce it correctly, but my apologies if I failed miserably. This is a pattern by Anna Bauer, who is another colorwork genius designer. And what I really love about this sweater is that it has color work in pearl and knit texture. So I've never done that before, so it's been really fun to try something new and see the results that are really pleasing to my eyeballs. One of the pattern testers made this sweater in this beautiful green, red, and pink color combination, so I copied her colors and yarn choice exactly because she is also a color genius and I love to do what the geniuses do. So this is knit in svensk ull, which is a Swedish non-superwash wool, and it's very nice and sticky. It's rustic, but it's not itchy like Let Lopi, for example. Like when you go like this, it feels soft and rustic, but in a soft way, not in an itchy way. I think if you have a problem with itch, this will be itchy, but if you don't, I think you'd really like it. And the background green color is called Bauer Forest. The red, I'm using a mixture of, I think it was a red alpaca mixed with svensk ull 2-ply to get the correct thickness of yarn, just whatever red scraps I had. And the green, by the way, is their 3-ply yarn, which is, it might be worsted. No, I don't think it's worsted. I think it's probably a DK weight. And this is knit on 4mm needles. The ribbing is made in 3.5mm needles. So this is a top-down yoke design. Oh, sorry, and the pink is Sednes Garn Cardigan in some type of light pink color. And pink and green is my favorite color combination, as you know. So this, just looking at this makes me really happy, and the red gives it enough Christmas feel to it to make it a Christmas sweater, but I don't think it's too crazy that I wouldn't want to wear it any other time of year. Anyways, this is a top-down yoke style sweater, and you start with this really cool knit one, purl one color work ribbing here at the neck. And then right after that, in the back, you do some short rows just to raise the back neckline. Here you can see the short rows in this pearl, knit and purl section here. Oh, there's another color here I forgot. This accent color is like a light greenish gray, and that one is called April Sun, and that is in the svensk ull 3-ply. And then after you do the German short rows, and that's knitted flat actually, so it's kind of hard to purl color work flat. So that actually did take me a lot longer than I was expecting. Oh, and if you saw my previous episode, you'll know that I started this entire sweater up until maybe here, and I chose kind of a pinkish red instead of a true red, and I didn't like it, so this is actually my second iteration of this sweater, and I'm loving the red much better. I'm so glad I went back and just changed it and redid it. Anyways, after the short rows, you start the color work yoke chart, and that took quite a while because there are some pearls in there in some rows, and some rows even had 3 colors and purling in there, so those took a while. I did make a lot of mistakes, but I went back and fixed them all. Just took some time is all. But the end result is so cool. I really like this. And then I split for sleeves and had the sleeves kind of just hanging there on live needles, the live stitches on needles like this, and I finished up the body. Now, when I tried this on, like I had done maybe a couple inches of the body and I tried it on and it was pretty oversized, which is fine, but I thought I would try to decrease at the side seams maybe every 4 rows. I decreased at the side just to bring it in a little bit by the time I got to my waist. And it kind of, I don't know if it turned out so well, it kind of did like a bubble effect here. So once I finish everything, I might just go and cut this whole thing, this whole chunkular bulge here out. Because it is, well, maybe I should block it first. Yeah, I'll probably block it first, see if I can stretch it out and have it relax a bit more, but right now it's a little bit bulbous there. I seem to have had the opposite effect. I probably just didn't decrease correctly. I would have liked to decrease in the round, but because of this pearl structure here, I felt like I couldn't do that and have all the pearl bumps line up perfectly in this nice grid pattern here. So that's why I did the decreases at the side. So we'll see how that turns out. Probably in my next episode I will have finished and found a solution to that problem. And then when I got to the hem, it was another 1x1 knit and purl, and then I did an I-cord bind off, a 2-stitch I-cord bind off to make this nice purled chunky edge here that matched this nice neckline chunky edge here. The sleeves took forever, obviously. I don't like sleeves. And I still have all the stitch markers in where I did all the decreases. I think it's every certain amount of centimeters you do a decrease, so it's pretty easy and straightforward. And I didn't change the sleeve length at all, but I did shorten the body a bit because I like when my sweaters hit like right at my hips, and I think this one was gonna go below my hips, but I think it needs to be blocked longer anyway, so we'll see what happens there. So where I am now is I've started on the second sleeve, maybe 4 or 5 rows, and I've got a long way to go. And I don't like doing sleeves, but the end result is gonna be totally worth it. And you know what I really like is when people try on their whips, so I will do that real quick. Okay, so now maybe you can see me wearing this in the cutaways. And I pulled it down a little bit to simulate what blocking might do, but maybe you can see that it is such a thick and sturdy fabric, especially with because it's Colorwork, the final fabric is pretty thick. And so it is a little oversized. I made the 3rd size. And so I think that's why the bulging, puckering thing is bulging up more than maybe it would if it was a finer yarn. But let me know what you think. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna have to see what happens after blocking, and I have no problems cutting my knitting and maybe taking out some inches from the side seam here. But I just love wearing this color. It just looks like really happy. And the arms are really big as well. Maybe I should have gone down a needle size for this project, but when it's winter, I do love having oversized knits, so it's not so oversized that I'm unhappy, but definitely a very cozy, oversized fit here. Oh, I also forgot to mention that right here, where there are 3 colors going on at the same time, the fabric is nice and thick, and it almost feels, it's so thick that it feels felted, like no cold air will penetrate, and that is really nice. Can't wear this in the summer for sure, but this is perfect for this time of year. I think I'll just show you the yarns real quick. This is my 4th ball of the Svensk Ull in Bower Forest, and it's a beautiful multi-dimensional green, kind of like a yellowish green. This is the accent color for the body, whoops, and the sleeves. This is that grayish green I was telling you about. This one's called April Sun. This is still my 1st ball of this, and I wonder if I have enough to do the other sleeve. The purl bumps are every third row, I believe, so I might be able to make it. And the sleeve should be going faster because in between the purl bumps you're just knitting stockinette, but for some reason, I don't know, I guess it is kind of long. And for some reason the sleeves just take me a long time. And then this is the red I was talking about, where I combined two different reds of slightly different hues together, and having that contrast really makes it pop. You can see here it's like a little bit darker and a little bit lighter red, and that just looks really cool in the finished object. And then here's the Sadness Garn Peer Gynt. Just a really light baby pink type of color. And so I did record some footage, I hope it turned out okay, of me showing you how I knit with 1, 2, and 3 colors, and how I knit the purling. I think I did, maybe I didn't do the purling and knitting at the same time. But in that cutaway I just did a little swatch. So when I knit with just 1 color, I knit English style. That's how I learned from a book when I was about 13 years old. And I like to anchor the right hand needle against my body to keep it totally still. And then using a lot of fingers and the left hand needle, I imagine myself just loading up all the stitches onto that right hand needle. And I feel like that goes pretty fast, and I'm very happy knitting that way. But when I started the first color work I ever did, which is the Kofte I was wearing in the beginning part of the video, I realized it would be really beneficial to learn continental knitting. So I timed this actually because I was curious, but it took about 40 hours to get comfortable with continental style knitting. And I do believe if I hadn't done that, color work would just take me a lot longer trying to do in one hand. I've tried continental colorwork knitting where you hold 2 yarns in the left hand, and I just can't get it right. I don't think I'm able to hold my needle in the correct way, but I have tried. But holding 1 yarn in each hand works for me best, and it's really easy to catch floats this way as well. So here you'll see me knitting 2 colors at a time, and then if a third color is introduced, I kind of just put it in front of myself while I'm knitting, and then whenever I need to pick up that color, I drop the yarn off my right hand and pick up the third color with my right hand, and then drop that. So it's kind of 2 yarns in one hand and the third yarn in my left hand, if that makes any sense. Okay, now my next whip is going to be a machine knitting whip, and also I just wanted to return to this theory I had a while ago, where you're supposed to be able to knit thicker yarns in my knitting machine, which is a standard gauge knitting machine, if you are using every other needle. So I tested that on this Svensk wool, which is still a DK weight, which the machine can usually do, but it is pretty thick. But I just tested it in case I didn't want to break the machine with an actual worsted weight yarn. So I cast on every other needle, and I think it totally worked. Like, that looks like a larger gauge regular knitting. So by skipping every needle, you just create kind of a tiny float in the back there. And then I tried doing every needle because it seemed like my machine could handle it. So this is using every single needle, and it's pretty tight, but it did work. So this is every needle compared to every other needle. So I think that's gonna open up a lot of possibilities for me in terms of using up my DK scrap yarn. I do have a lot of DK weight yarn, and I'm thinking of just making blankets, or I don't even know what, but I could come up with something in the future. So on to that machine whip I was telling you about. So I decided to make a sweater, testing out just making a sweater on the knitting machine, but also a couple of other techniques. So what I did was I self-drafted a pattern, and to do that, first I made a swatch on the machine. So this is just stapled into my swatch book. Here at the top is a 2x1 fake rib where you cast on 2 stitches, skip 1 stitch, cast on 2 stitches, and then make a fake rib like that, because I just have a single bed machine, so I can't do purl stitches unless I manually turn them around into purl. So at the top is the tighter tension. I think I did like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then down here is tension 5. And for the sweater, I think I went with tension 4. And this is after I steamed it. When you first knit in the machine, especially thin yarns, especially wool yarns also, it looks very airy and loose, and there's a lot of holes in there, which you'll see here. This hasn't been steamed at all, and there's a lot of holes, as you can see. But anyways, before I get to that, I made my swatch, and then I made a schematic of the kind of sweater I wanted to try, which is here. It's kind of like a V-neck drop shoulder sleeved sweater with some waist shaping and straight sleeves. So I just made a bunch of calculations to work this thing as a front panel, a back panel, and 2 sleeves, and both will be knitted from the bottom up. So I already did this 3 weeks ago, so I'm going to try to remember as much as I can. But the back panel is pretty straightforward. I have some waste yarn cast on here at the bottom, and then I did a 2x1 fake ribbing like I showed you in my swatch, where I skipped every 3rd needle to create this faux ribbing effect, if you can see. And then, yep, I chose tension 4, and I just knit maybe like 200 rows total and decreased a little bit at the side here. You can't even tell, but it's basically just a giant square. And up here is the neckline, and I decided I didn't want to deal with calculating how to, oh no, a stitch dropped off. Okay, gotta be careful there. I didn't want to bother calculating decreasing for the neckline and all that, so I thought I'll just cut that neckline out later on. So here's the back piece. Very thin, lightweight fabric, but it's gonna puff up just like I showed you in my swatch. Oh, and then once I got to the neckline, I just took all these needles off, the live stitches off onto a needle, because I didn't really know what to do with it. But I didn't want to drop the stitches, and I thought I didn't want to bind off either. Then I made a front panel, which has a lot of issues, sadly. There's some dropped stitches right here. I don't even know if you call that a drop stitch, but it just messed up big time. Maybe once I steam it, it won't be that obvious. But then there's another, I think there's another section here. Oh yeah. So there's some problems here, which is very sad, because overall this went really well. So again, I did a bottom up here, waste yarn at the bottom, and then I did a stripe here in the same faux rib. And then this is really cool. What did I do here? So I found a tutorial on YouTube, I will link it, for doing this really cool mitered ribbed V-neck shape. So what you do is at the center, you do a double decrease to the center, and then you transform the stitches here into purl stitches on every other row. And every other row became too much, too tedious, too many rows. So as I went along, I did it every 3rd row, I think, or every 2 rows, sorry. So I think that looks really cool, really neat and tidy, and I can't even remember how I did it now, so I'm just gonna link that video below if you're interested. But here's another piece to that puzzle. So yeah, it's a little bit weird that I finished this neckline, but I've got the back unfinished, so I think I'm gonna have to be careful when I cut out the back neckline to leave enough room for this very thick edging here. Then I'm gonna seam it together at the sleeves. Like I'll try it on and see how much to sew for the sleeve edge here, and then calculate. I didn't do any of the calculations on the sleeves yet because I just kind of wanted to see what the finished front and back panel piece was going to be first, and I'll do some calculations there. But I think the sleeve is, since it's a drop shoulder, I think it's pretty much going to be a giant rectangle. So we'll see how this turns out. I don't know if this is going to be a success, but it definitely is a learning project. And I can always, when I'm ready to use this yarn again, I can always just unravel it, no problem. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Not too much because I was really busy over Thanksgiving. So I will share one other thing that I just barely began on, and it's going to be a cabled cardigan jacket type of thing, and it's going to be my own design because I have this thing where I have a very specific thing that I want to make, and that's the beauty of learning how to knit and sew and everything, is if you want something that doesn't exist, you can just make it yourself. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. But let me start off with the yarn. This is called Ba Ramu Woodnote, and this is a DK weight yarn. This exact base also comes in an Aran weight yarn, but I have the DK one, and this is the color Hare. And this is a beautiful, very, very light brown, like a warm beige brown type of color. And it is so soft. This is my new favorite yarn of the month, or maybe top yarn of the year, because it's non-superwash and it does have a rustic, very stretchy, bouncy, springy feel, but it's also really, really soft. So this is 34% BFL, 33% Masham, and 33% Merino. So I think all those sheeps are very, very warm. And this comes in 100 gram skeins, which is 204 meters or 223 yards. And they recommend you use a 4mm needle with this, which is what I'm going to be using for the project I'm thinking of. And the gauge is 24 stitches and 30 rows to make a 4-inch or 10-centimeter square. Yeah, I can't recommend this yarn highly enough. It's non-superwash, but super soft. So my main issue was that all the cabled cardigan patterns that are popular right now have kind of like the exact same design of a little diamond and some moss stitch and that type of thing, and I wanted something very specific, which I will just tease right now, but I'm not going to share too much because I don't have much to show, and I think it'll be more fun in my next episode. So here is just a little mock-up of a cable. And let me know if you can tell what it is. I have adjusted this pattern so it looks more like what it's supposed to be, but if you can guess, let me know below. So that's all I have to share with you today. I hope you're having a great December. And if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, I hope it's not too dark and cold like it is here. And let me know what you're working on. Are you gift knitting? Have you finished your gift knitting, or are you kind of panicked as we get closer to Christmas here? And I also want to say thank you for all the comments on my last video. I love chatting with you in the comments and answering your questions and seeing what you're working on and what part of the world you're from. I have a lot of people from Germany, which is really exciting. So hello, love to visit Germany one day, hopefully. So yeah, if you want to see what I'm going to be working on next time, the cables cardigan project I'm going to be designing, and how this Christmas sweater turns out, then I'd love for you to subscribe and like this video to help support my channel. Thank you so much again for watching, and have a great weekend. Bye!